So my name is Elaine Sullivan. I'm not a neuroscientist. No, I'm going to have to stand here, aren't I? Okay, I'm not a neuroscientist. I am just somebody that's passionate about people. I love people. I love what they do and how they think and how they act. And I think neuroscience is such an amazing group of sciences that everybody ought to know about them. We all have a little bit within us that we need to understand how we operate and how other people operate. So I'm going to take you on a journey. I'm going to take you on a journey that's over 500 million years old, from the little creature that first developed a brain through to modern day humanity, and not everything else in between, because I've only got 45 minutes. I know I can speak fast, but not that fast. So I'm going to give you a little bit of Neuroscience 101, some just brief outlines as to how the brain actually works, and then I'm going to progress that to who we are today, why we think and how we act today, and the reasons behind that, and what you can take away from this as actionable steps in order to be able to take them on a Monday, work on yourself, work on your team members, perhaps letting them know what you're doing, but also work on your team if you run a team as well. So let's get started, because I've got 45 minutes and a lot to say. So what is neuroscience? Neuroscience is something that's fairly recent. Neuroscience is something that we've done psychology and various different things, but brands of neuroscience now, there's about 13 different branches of it. We can't go through everything today, so I'm just going to give you a little bit of a flavour of the types of science that there is. There's the cognitive science, there's the neuropsychology, there's neuroimaging, what you can see and how the brain works. There's some amazing stuff. DTI is one of them, in that we can see how the white matter actually operates when we start talking about things. But because of these high imaging techniques, we now have the idea of being able to see what goes on inside the brain as things happen. So this is the brain. The brain, I've actually got one of these. This is what got me started. I had a pains in my head, so I went off and had an MRI scan, and I just thought it was absolutely fantastic, and it was fascinating, and I wanted to know what those funny things were in the middle. As it was, my brain was perfectly okay. It was just the rest of my sanity that was the problem. So this is the brain as we know it now. Years ago, hundreds of millions of years ago, the brain wasn't like this. The brain was perhaps a few neurons split out throughout a body. And those brain cells, those neurons, used to travel, allow chemical signals and electrical signals to travel around the body. But they were just merely relayed, they weren't processed. But as we ended up developing a little bit more, we got to the stage where we had one common primate ancestor. It's a little thing, and I'm hopeless with names, so I have to write them down on my hand. It's a Urbilitarian, something like that. But it basically, what it is, it's a roundish flatworm that had the initial brain that we now know to be the cause of us becoming primates, and also the fact that we're now humans. So that brain developed, and then about 500 million years ago, there was a bit of a problem. What happened was that, well, it happened twice. We duplicated our chromosomes, and we duplicated it twice. So nature actually abhors waste, and so went along to decide that it was going to do something about it, and this was the formulation of the brain. So we start with the brain stem. The brain stem is the thing that keeps us alive. That's the automatic things that happen within our body. So when we try and breathe, if we try and stop ourselves from breathing, we can do it for very long periods of time, but eventually we'll pass out, and this kicks in and allows us to breathe again. This is also responsible for making sure that our heart beats and all of those automatic things that we don't even think about. Then we end up with the limbic system. So the limbic system is what they called the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain rather. So that is where we ended up with a situation where we could actually start processing the chemicals that were going through our body and the extra neurotransmitters, which is what enabled us to survive. So this is our survival mechanism. And it's based on three different things. The hippocampus, which is actually how our memories are processed. It's got the other one that I can never remember, the nucleus accumbens, which is where we get our reward centre. These are the things that make us do what we do. And also the amygdala. So the amygdala is the thing that's responsible for keeping us safe. So the hippocampus is really quite interesting, and the way that our brain works and the memories and such like, what happens within our brain is that 99% of what we do is pure habit. Who here has actually learnt to drive? Yeah, most of us. So, in fact, all of us probably. So, do you remember when you first learnt to drive? You first learnt to drive, and what it was is, oh my God, I've got to sit in my chair. I've got to remember to adjust my mirror. I've got to look at my wing mirror. I've got to make sure that I'm not in gear before I put my foot on the accelerator, and then I've got to put my foot on the brake, and then I've got to, oh, and for me, I had to take my hair out of my eyes because that's my driving instructor, because she always told me to do that, and then I actually have to turn the wheel slightly, and then, and oh my God, let's look in the mirror, and there's no cars, and I've just done 1 inch to get away from the curve. Who here now has driven down the road, maybe 30 or 40 miles, and has no idea how they got there? It's frightening, isn't it? And that's because our brain puts everything into memory so that we don't actually have to think about it. There's so much processing that goes on in our head that we only have to think about the things that actually are going to impact us. Perhaps the car that is going to impact us as we're driving around completely in our own little world. Oh my God, there's a car in front of me. So what happens with everything that you do is the information is taken into your brain, and your brain has a filter. And it filters out anything that is not necessary for you to think about. So it goes, oh, have I seen this before? And the brain goes, yes. And it says, okay, fine. Stick that away. We don't have to worry about that. We're going to do that on autopilot. Or it goes, oh, have I seen something like that before? Yeah, that's okay. Well, it's close enough, so I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to park that as well. And then, oh, have I seen this? And it goes, no. And it goes, oh my God, I've got to think. And then suddenly you go into you're actually now consciously aware of what's going on in your life. And this is where we end up with the two, the nucleus accumbens, never say it, and also the amygdala. So what's happening to me is that I am now processing things on a different level. And so we now look at the cerebral cortex. And the cerebral cortex is the extra bit. This is the bit that makes us human. A lot of primates actually have this as well, but ours is so extended past the normal primates that actually that's what makes us human. So how does this all hang together? And I'm running you through this because when we get out the other side of this, you'll have an understanding of when you're in a position with somebody and you see them react, you'll understand what's happening. So the next thing is this. So we think that what tends to happen is an event happens to us and we react. And that's not the case. The event happens to us and then it goes through that belief system, that system of, have I seen this before? Is this a threat to me? You know, do I have to think about this? And those beliefs are really core to us. That we have those beliefs that we've actually grown with, and we have those beliefs that we've actually learned as a result of our experiences. But the limbic system is just pure reaction. And that pure reaction doesn't matter what your life experience is, it's going to happen to you. And what happens in the old days of the caveman is it kept us safe. We hadn't got time to think. We didn't look at the saber-toothed tiger and go, saber-toothed tiger's running at me. I wonder if it spotted me. What should I do about that? Perhaps I should run, by which time we'd be dead. There's a 3-second rule with the limbic system. When it was the saber-toothed tiger, you ran. If you didn't outrun it in 3 seconds, you'd be dead. If you decided to fight it, the limbic system pumps the whole of your body up with cortisol and adrenaline and makes sure that your legs have as much blood to them as they possibly can, and all of these hormones are coursing through you so you can outrun this beast or you can outfight this beast. Because if you didn't, 3 seconds later you'd be dead as well. Or alternatively, the third one was actually freeze. Let's switch off everything that we possibly can. Let's pretend not to be here And let's hope it doesn't have a good sense of smell. Otherwise, 3 seconds later, you would be dead again. That's great. But this leads you to the stage where you're in the position that you are running on these hormones and adrenaline, and that's actually what can cause some stress. And there's been huge studies that are done to now actually recognise that our body is actually where most of this stress and the emotions are, which is why you get ill. If you're in, if you've got problems at work, sometimes you'll get a backache, or you'll have other issues around your body as a result of the stress. Because we then have this additional bit, which is the prefrontal cortex, which is our executive function. So this is the bit that makes us human. Now the course down the limbic system is still the fastest course. That's the one that keeps us, we don't think about it, that's the one that keeps us alive. But the prefrontal cortex is the way that we can override what the limbic system is actually doing. So take, for instance, again, we'll do the same thing, driving down the road. And you're driving down the road and all of a sudden a car cuts out to you, misses you by about this much, you swerve to avoid it and you just miss the car. Your limbic system is going to cut in. It's going to go, oh my goodness, I've ended up, the person's cut up with me, he's so rude, he has no idea, and probably many expletives at the same time. But that's your limbic system that's cut in there, your belief that you are under threat. But your prefrontal cortex can overcome that. So there's some communication that goes on between your prefrontal cortex and your limbic system. And you can go, okay, fine, I know he's just cut me up, but what if he's just had a call from the hospital, his wife's just gone into labour? What if my child has just been taken ill and I've got to get to the school? Suddenly you will go from the stressed, emotional place that you were in through to the place that you're now understanding what's happened, and your emotions will change. And that's what the prefrontal cortex does. It enables you to be able to change those emotions. And so you've probably all heard of mindfulness, which isn't just about sitting there going on and meditating. It is actually about looking at this stuff, looking at what your reactions are, looking at what your core beliefs are, and then questioning them. Because we end up, if we question them, they're out in the open. If they're out in the open, we can examine them. If we can examine them, we can understand them. And if we can understand them, we can change them. Because unlike years and years ago, we used to feel that when we were born with a certain number of neurons, and that was it. Those cells, we would die over the course of time, and that was it. We would be maybe 15, 20, 21 is normally the time when people have stopped growing, and we used to think the brain was fixed. Neuroscience now proves that there is a plasticity to the brain. We can continue learning and we can continue growing, and in the old adage, we can treat old dogs new tricks. It's tough, but we can change and we can modify our behaviours accordingly. So imagine, if you will, our brain, when we're born, there's 600 million neurons in a baby's brain. It is a huge sponge that just soaks up everything. But those 600 million neurons actually equate to 250,000 nerves being produced per minute for every single day of that pregnancy in order to build this huge neural net. Now, we don't use all of those. And what we've done is we've laid down the foundation of this multi-pathway network. And then as we learn and as we expand, we're in the position that the ones that are most used get strengthened. So a bit like when you walk across a path and there's the shortcut in the middle and you get the ground that's actually being worn away because that's the one that's going to be, that's the path that we'll use all the time. And the ones that aren't used die off. But it doesn't mean to say they've died off forever. We can actually choose that if a behaviour doesn't suit us now, it might have suited us when we were younger, but if it doesn't suit us now, we can change that behaviour and we can create another path through the system. And that's why neuropsychology and neurophysiology, all working together, understand that things like stroke victims, the quicker you can get to a stroke victim and start them moving again, the quicker the brain will actually try and find different pathways. You leave it long enough and the brain will give up. But there's some amazing stuff that's being done. You've probably seen the robotic arms that you can now move by thought and what have you, because we've actually strapped you up and can actually train you through various different things to use these arms as well. Where we are going with all of this is absolutely fascinating. Coming back to this though, the prefrontal cortex, in the old days, when we were cavemen, we had a 3-second rule. So when we got pumped up with all of this stuff that was going through our body that was going to get us to kill something or run away from something, that was fine. Because that only lasts really about 90 seconds. So if you're ever stressed, just sit and wait, because it will actually calm itself down, because we can't keep pumping out that all the time. Not in an acute way. The worry is that actually with our stressful lives these days, we are constantly being bombarded with Trump and his negative news. We're being bombarded with social media that is actually being psychologically written to make sure that it triggers our pain points, and it also makes sure that it triggers the happy hormone, the oxytocin and the dopamine, because that's actually what gets us motivated, and that's why we become addicted to these things. So we end up having to cope with stresses and strains that our physical bodies were never supposed to be able to cope with, because it was the 3-second rule. So what happens these days is that actually we're still in the fight and flight. We've still got all of these things that are being bombarded with us, and these are the things that we have to cope with. So as human beings, we have to go to the next level of evolution, and neuroscience is actually now starting to map out, hopefully, every single cell that's within the brain and every single connection from that cell to fully understand how we can actually elevate ourselves to the next level. It's a bigger project than even mapping DNA, because the number of cells that we've got in the body, in the brain rather, is greater than the number of stars that we can see in the sky, even with the Hubble telescope. So the physical building of the brain from one set to another is, that's something that happens automatically. That's actually outside of our control. But what then happens after is actually within our control. It's within the control of ourselves as we get older, or in the control of our parents, almost. So this relatedness is something that's inherent to every single one of us. In this room, we are actually all physically related. We all have been derived from Eve, the woman that came out of Africa, and they have now identified a single Y chromosome male that is actually the father of all of us. So hello, cousins. But the relatedness goes further than that. The relatedness is actually how we cope in a world that initially was really nasty to us. We have a long gestation period, and we also have a long period to go from this baby that's completely impossible to look after itself to somebody that can actually hunt and run for itself. So what happens within the womb is that actually this relatedness starts. Children start to recognise their caregivers or their mother's voice before they're actually born. So that when they are born, they know the one that has actually carried them. They know the person that has given life to them. And so that starts the bonding process. The bonding process then goes further. I was talking about the area in the brain, the limbic system, and the, again I'll do it, nucleus accumbens. I'll remember that one day. But that's the one that triggers and receives, the dopamine is triggered, and that's the one that receives the dopamine. And our dopamine is the feel-good hormone. That's the thing that every time we do something, we feel really great because it's the dopamine that's cut in. That's the one that also makes us do it over and over again because we get addicted to it. But there's another hormone, which is the love hormone, which is oxytocin. And so when a baby is born and a mother is cuddled, you've got the dopamine, and you've got the oxytocin. Now, I don't suggest that you do it here because it just looks a little bit odd, but when you get home, go to your partner and just hug your partner without saying anything. Hug your partner for 10 seconds and just see how it feels. No movement, no nothing. Just hold that, because that actually triggers each other's bodies to lower the stress levels. The heart slows down, and that's what the mother is doing to the baby, so that the baby can feel good. The baby feels good with the oxytocin, but also then gets a dopamine hit, and the mother gets a dopamine hit, which means that they're going to do it more often. So the reason why we have that relatedness is, as I said, that the child is absolutely helpless. So survival of the tribe has to start first. The tribe has to grow. So the parents or the elders have to look after the youngsters, and the youngsters are programmed to allow that to happen with those big eyes, and they're the ones that get loved. They then come into the tribe, and then they carry the tribe on. We end up with each of us being in our own tribes. We're all in our tribe here today. We all follow Agile. I suspect a lot of you were in the tribe called Sporting Fan last night with England. And therefore, we all have some commonalities. Now, if I'm in the tribe Sporting Fans, and I suspect all of us that were sitting in that room were England, and all of us went, oh, when Croatia's followed us. Now, what if I was the Croatian and I'd gone, yes? What would have happened is that you would all have looked at me, I'm not in your tribe, I would not be Mrs. Popular. And that's what happens, is that as a tribe, we actually then start passing information to each other. So our agile tribes and our working tribes, we have a culture that we foster within that environment, and we want to be part of that tribe, and therefore we will behave like that tribe. And there's some amazing things that have been done on conformity. I don't know if anybody's seen the one of the lady that's actually sitting in a doctor's waiting room, and the bell goes off, and everybody within the waiting room stands up. And she's looking and she's thinking, you know, what's going on here? So they all sit down, and then the bell goes up and she stands up again. And she's, okay, fine. Now, because she's the odd one out, she starts standing up. So one by one, all of the people that are actually in the room go out. She's now the only person in the room, and the bell goes. And because it's what's supposed to be done, she stands up. New people then start coming into the waiting room, and she then starts teaching them the rules, so that by the time she's gone, all of the people that are there are new people. But they're following the tribe and what the tribe is supposed to do, even though they have no idea who the tribe is. So when you've got things that happen within your work environment, think about, is this actually the right thing to do? Or are we doing it because that's the way we've done it? Because we will conform, we will follow the tribe. But we also have to understand that our tribe doesn't actually work in exactly the same as everybody else's tribe. So you might have 2 or 3 agile groups, and they will all be quite distinctive in the way that they work. And that's okay. That's a good place to be. And it can be so distinctive that it ends up with, even down to how people from the east of the world and how people from the west of the world operate. In the west of the world, it's I. I've done this, I've done that, this is my success. And in the east, it's all about family and community. So how we operate is obviously based on those things, which is why diversity is a really good thing, because it gives us a great idea about all of the other things that other people see that we don't see, because we are unconsciously biased. Moving on from the relatedness, which starts from within the room to about 2, you then start developing your own emotions. And so the child of 2 will start understanding who they are and how they operate. So that child, and if anybody has children and they get to the terrible 2s and they start throwing themselves on the floor, it's a great idea. I don't know if you saw it on the television. Throw yourself on the floor with them. I did it once with my grandson. He was really embarrassed. He'd never do it again. But it was him getting to the stage where he felt confident about himself. I have an identity. This is who I am. You're stepping on that identity and I don't like it. And so he extended his personal identity and his emotions to explain to me that that's what was going on. At the same time there, we understand that we also have an identity that is separate from somebody else. So we've gone from our level 1 type of relationship, I have my needs. I'm going to scream and cry because I need feeding now, or alternatively I need my bottom changed. But we then go to a second level, which is that I recognise that you have needs. You've got your needs and I've got my needs. And I recognise that there is somebody that's outside of me, which is my mother or maybe other adults or even other babies. And we end up understanding what's going on. And we can then start this travelling down and actually becoming empathic with people. We'll go back to the tribe, we'll go back to England last night. We were all naturally empathic yesterday. When they scored that second goal last night, we were all in the same mindset and we understood exactly what they were going through. But empathy isn't just about being able to put ourselves into their place. It's actually about experiencing exactly the same emotions and wanting to do something about it. That empathy goes as far as that we are actually hardwired for that. There was an experiment, they put one of these caps on a monkey, and this monkey was chewing some nuts, and they watched all the neurons that were firing off. So the monkey was chewing the nuts, no one's fine, and now they have a pattern as to where the motor skills were and everything else. Like most science, it was an accident that actually caused us to find out what was going on. In that a scientist came in as this was happening with the monkey and he was hungry. So the scientist actually grabbed some of the nuts and started eating them themselves, and the monkey spotted this. The monkey still has the helmet on. As the scientist was eating the nuts, the monkey's neurons started firing off. And they were exactly the same neurons as when he was eating them. So the scientists have gone on to check all of these things, and this empathy happens, these mirror neurons, when you're doing something that I recognise, my neurons will fire. So this puts us in the place, you remember this office stress that I was saying about? Well, in Britain we walk in and we're supposed to put a good face on things. We're not supposed to talk about our emotions and everything else. And therefore we will keep it all in and we think we're doing a really good job. Well, actually we're not, because we are still giving off the signals, we are still giving off the pheromones that we don't even realise that we give off, and our counterparts will still pick these things up. So if you're in a bad place, actually find the language to say that. Find the language to say, this is how I feel, this is my issue, and this is how I would like to deal with it. Because then if I'm feeding off, say, your feelings, if I'm feeding off your feelings and I start feeling bad, I can do what a child does and recognise that it's your feelings that I'm empathising with, it's not my feelings. Because otherwise, I will then pass it on to other people and you end up with a whole team that's in a really bad place. So find the words and use the language. At the same time as we develop emotions, we end up creating our identity, and our identity is about who we are and what my status is. My status in the world. So if I was the caveman, I'd want to be the strongest. I'd love to be the boss because I'm going to eat first. But in the real world that we live in today, we don't have that. But we have things like self-esteem and status. And what is really good about the Agile world is that we actually allow everybody to have a status of their own. Everybody normally has their own particular specialism within the group, which means that my status is based on my needs and your status is based on your needs, and we don't overlap. So status is really, really important. The development of that status carries on for the whole of our lives. It carries on as we learn and we experience, because even if I had a twin that was genetically identical to me, my experience would be different and my brain works and chemicals in my brains would be different as well. So status and individuality is really important. And this is the more interesting one of the lot, is the intrinsic motivation. human beings are goal-setting machines. If it wasn't for the fact that we were goal-setting machines, the Adam and the Eve of old would never have gone, you know what, don't much like this Africa, I think I'm going to go for a walk. Not quite sure where it's going to take me, but yeah, I'm just going to go up and I'm going to turn right. And their ancestors wouldn't have gone, well, Adam and Eve did it, but you know what, I can't be bothered. Instead they went, they never came back, I wonder what happened with them. I'm going to go walking north and then I'm going to turn west. And so we are those goal-seeking mechanisms that just want to go out and do things for the sake of doing them. It's a bit like if you've got an urge to travel. You've got the urge to travel and you might decide you're going to go off to Bali and then I'll go to Thailand and then I don't know, I love the idea of Mexico. So those things and those that you do and those places that you go really make you feel good. You get that dopamine hit, you love it and you're going to continue doing it. But it doesn't diminish the want to travel. And this is what intrinsic motivation is about. If you are intrinsically motivated, you are just going to go out and do what you want to do because you want to, because you find it fun. Kids play because they want to. They're going through a learning exercise. They're working out, who's going to be stronger? How do I manage my emotions? Aggression doesn't normally work. They're going through all of those, and that's actually wiring the brain. And they're getting fun out of it, and they're learning at the same time. Which is why I think our school system is wrong, starting them at 4. Send them over to the nurseries in Sweden and Denmark and just allow them to go and run in the forest, and because they're going to learn just as much and they're actually going to come out much more wholesome people. Maybe we will learn in this country at some stage. But intrinsic motivation cannot be rewarded. If you've got somebody that's really enjoying what they're doing and then you end up saying, right, okay, fine, that's done really well, I want you to do it next week. And if you do it next week, I'm going to give you some money. Because then that stops any intrinsic motivation. Even in the animal world, they have done studies on monkeys that will play with toys from hours on end because they just really love it. And then they'll start introducing food as reward for continuing to play with these toys. And that's it, they're completely demotivated. The value of playing with a toy was to play. It wasn't actually to get the food. So if you're working in teams and you see somebody having some fun, yeah, enjoy it with them, encourage it, but don't actually add any extra value on the fact that they are just enjoying fun. That's why big companies like Google and such like, they just give them a fun day. Tell you what, you go off, you just decide what is going to be fun for you. And oh my goodness, have they come up with some amazing suggestions that have actually added value to the company, so it's been worthwhile for them to do it. So intrinsic motivation is really, really important. And if you can find fun in your life, then please go do it. Go play, have fun, and enjoy. So how do we put this all together? How do we make all of this work for ourselves? So this is my adaptation on a model by David Rock, which is called SCARF. So this is a model of neuroscience. There are a number of different models, some that have 12 different modalities and what have you. This, I think, is really simple. And I've changed it from SCARF to SCARFs because I actually think that success ought to be added into this as well. So we start off with status. Status, as I say, is about how you perform within the team and how you are rated against others in the team. It doesn't mean to say that you have to be better than everybody else at everything, but it does mean to say that you have to have a sense of self-esteem and that your position in the team is warranted, but also recognised, and status is really important. There was a company that I worked with that decided that they were going to do some organisational change, and unfortunately they printed something off and left it on the printer. What it had was a suggestion of a organisational chart where the people that had worked longest actually got a promotion. It wasn't a promotion of money, it wasn't a promotion in status, they just gave them a title, senior. And then they decided not to implement it. And 6 weeks later they were still whopping up the aftermath because all of these people that had been given this promotion to senior were suddenly really, really angry. Why is it that I've been here for so long and I'm not being recognised over everybody else? So be careful when you do status. The next thing is certainty. Certainty is a position that we all want to be in. We all want to make sure that what we're doing, we know what we're doing and we're comfortable with what we're doing. Now, I don't know if this is actually live streaming, but I'm going to look into that camera now because my husband, Paul, I am so sorry I'm bringing you into this. So my husband is somebody that loves certainty. He always has. And I know if he's going to get stressed, and I'm imagining him looking at me now, if he gets stressed, everything has to be organised. So much so that 2 days before we were getting married, our best man and his wife turned up at our house. We were going off to the hotel and the men were staying at home. And my husband's way of dealing with stress is to organise. And he organised the remote controls beautifully. Everyone was lined up absolutely perfectly, equidistant from the side of the table and the bottom of the table and between each other. And we were horrible. As he walked out, we just messed them all out again, and he had to come and lay them all out again. So Paul, I'm sorry, I really am sorry. But so that's what certainty does for you. So if you are going through change in your workplace, make sure that you communicate it well. Make sure that people understand what's going on. Make sure that you listen to, really actively listen to what people are telling you, because they're not telling you this is all wrong. They're saying, I don't feel comfortable about this. I don't know what's going to happen. And if people aren't complaining, then you really have a problem, because that means that they're indifferent and they don't care, in which case you might as well give up totally. Next one's autonomy. Autonomy goes back to that intrinsic motivation. We want to be the saviour, the creator of our own destiny. We want to know that what we do is actually because of us. So if you go round and you're telling people how to do things, or you're a manager and you're managing the workloads and things like that, be careful about it. Because you could be treading on this autonomy. If you tread on this autonomy, people are going to react, they're going to be stressed. It is a core belief from the limbic system, and they will react. So be careful and make sure that you can allow them to work. If you're not completely comfortable, buddy them up with somebody. Allow them to be autonomous between them. Allow checks and balances so that they can actually work together. And also, if you employ people that you inherently trust. Gerd was saying this morning about going with your gut instinct, and actually trust is very much a gut instinct when you've met somebody for the first time. You inherently feel that you've got some empathy with them and inherently feel that you can trust them. Go with that, because it will actually work. And then when they're employed, trust them. Relatedness. We've talked about relatedness and how people need to feel related to everybody else. In the Agile world, we're doing really well by actually making sure we have these little Agile groups, these Scrum groups and such like. But it doesn't have to be an Agile. In any work environment, when you've got a group of people, they want to come together. Encourage that. Allow them to do things perhaps outside of the work environment, but maybe within work time, to get together. And encourage them to find ways of getting together for themselves. Allow them to be autonomous as they do it. Perhaps it's clearing up part of an office so that you can have a coffee sit down, and have some lunch there. These little things make a huge difference. And that relatedness also is not just within the people that are working together, it's with yourself and your manager, or your manager and yourself, or preferably with a leader. I don't like managers. Fairness. The 3-year-old child that sees their friend having sweeties and they didn't get any. That 3-year-old child is still within each and every one of us. Each and every one of us can look and go, he's had a pay increase, he's had more holiday than me, etc., etc. So recognise that fairness is still something, and that's about still coming together as a community. If I've killed the woolly mammoth, I don't eat the whole mammoth, I share it amongst the whole of my tribe, and I make sure that everybody gets an equal share in accordance to what they need. And it's the same in a work environment. Fairness is really, really important, and again, it's one of those core beliefs. And the one that I add is success. Success breeds success. If you're working in a fairly siloed environment, go sing your successes. Tell people what you've done. Tell them how you've done it. Celebrate success in the team. Celebrate the success of an individual. The more success that you get, the more that that limbic part of your brain will actually pump out dopamine and receive dopamine, and it will encourage that behaviour again and again. We are addictive. We want to make sure that we do things that we really enjoy, and our brain encourages us to do that by the happy hormone that it kicks out. So if you can celebrate your success, what you're doing is, brain, I've done a really great job. I love the buzz that you've given me. Let me have that intrinsic motivation to go and do more of it, because I want that dopamine hit. So that is pretty much that. That's the scarf medal. And thank you. Thank you very much. And I've got 2 minutes before the... So are there any questions? Yes?
Question about fairness.
Yes.
Because we have a situation where our team is distributed, so we are in 2 different continents, and different rule law applies, so the people in the States get a lot less holidays going to them, especially the people in Britain.
Yes.
Eventually they will accrue them, but how would you handle a situation like that?
I was saying earlier about the differences between how the East and how the West operate with the I and the we. What I think you need to do is to actually understand basically what drives those individuals. So over in this country, we have our holiday, we use it up, and often if we don't use it, we lose it. Whereas in America, I believe what they can do is they accrue it, and then they go off and have a year-long break somewhere at the end of it. So the way that it works differently. You have to find that, you have to understand the individual. I could actually be sitting in the same office as you, and I could actually get exactly the same benefits as you, but actually I would feel as though I'm being cheated, and you would feel quite happy. So look at your staff and understand what it is that they personally need. Now it may well be it's not actually extra holiday that the Americans need. You could possibly persuade them by saying, okay, we've got this amount of work that's done this week, and I did this with somebody, we've got this amount of work that's got to be done this week. The moment that amount of work is done, time's yours. Go off and do some fishing or something like that. It doesn't cost you any money, your work still gets done, they're highly motivated, and they actually feel that you're being really fair to them, in fact overly fair. So it's that sort of thing that you can do. Okay. Anyone else? No? Great. Thanks very much indeed. Lunch is awaiting you. Thank you.